So nice to be here. I've been here a year ago, and I absolutely loved it. The event was fantastic, but connecting with people afterwards was even better. Hope we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more in person after the session, but I just wanted to say that I'm really glad to be here again, and thank you for the invitation. A little bit about me. Who over here is actually using Miro? Okay. So if you never used Miro, Miro is used now by approximately 2 to 3 million product managers, developers, agile practitioners, designers, and UX researchers as part of a much bigger community of users, enabling you to collaborate and work well together. I've joined Miro 4 months ago, really excited because I've been Miro user since 2016, so it's always fun to work on a product you're using every day. But I will talk a little bit more about not just Miro, but my general AI stack. And for that, I will just quickly give you my background. So I started, over 20 years ago at Nokia as well, although not at Nokia Networks, but Nokia devices back then. And I spent about 10 years building different software apps for Nokia. And after that, I spent 12 years essentially in different kinds of startups, scale-ups. And I think when you make that transition from working for a large company to moving to a startup, you realize that there are two things that matter: efficiency and velocity. And when you don't have enough efficiency, you work 80 hours a week to get the velocity you need, which is not very sustainable. I've learned that with my first burnout. So I am personally super excited about AI because AI allows me to be more efficient and get the velocity that I need without necessarily having to burn out on a regular basis. So I'll share with you some of the tools that I'm using right now to help me with this efficiency. But before I jump into that, we always like to build products for some point in the future. Why we do that? Obviously, it takes some time to ship, and then you expect the product will be there for 3, 4, 5 years at least, competitive. So you cannot build a product for how the reality is right now. You have to think about how it will look in the future. And we ask ourselves, how do we think the product management role or the whole product development process will change in 3 years' time? Sure, we've heard a lot of these things already, but first one, rise of agentic workflows. Number 2, this is something controversial, but I'll explain my reasoning. AI-assisted generalists will reshape the teams. What it means in practice is designers will do product managers will do some of the engineering, and so on. So our role become sort of a little bit more blurred. Idea-validated loops collapse. I think we'll, for the first time, hit the reality where you can do, in 5 days, you can move from an idea to a fully validated prototype that you're coding, something that was promised to us by the design sprint, never really materialized. Number 4, unified knowledge graphs. I think what it means is all of the insights, whether it's about the customers or your company, together assisting you in making decisions. And then I'll talk a little bit about what is the human UI complementarity in that word, and the human attention crisis that comes from it. So let's start with the rise of agentic workflows. Yes, traditional product management is giving way to multi-agent systems. I've counted yesterday, I have 11 agents that work in the background as I'm speaking right now, doing a lot of really boring tasks for me. But this is just the beginning, right? 3 years from now, I expect that all of my boring tasks will be done by agents, and I'll be doing mostly the fun art of creating and building. But I think as we prepare for this reality, we must also embrace the fact that we have to change, and we have to change our perspective. And some of our skills that we were so good at and made us successful will not be relevant because AI will do them better. And our job will be really to orchestrate that AI and make sure that it doesn't make mistakes, doesn't hallucinate, doesn't drift, and so on. The second thing is we'll see more AI-assisted generalists. This is an interesting trend. I've met, I think in the last 2 weeks, 5 startup founders of companies that are under 15 people who do not have a designer. might sound controversial, but they all work from tools like Replit, Lovable, build prototypes, give them to engineers to finish coding. Works for them very well. It's not a trend that we expect enterprises will start embracing in the next year. It will take some time. But you're essentially seeing these role changes where CEO becomes a PM, becomes a designer, does a bit of coding, engineers do a bit of design, designers now build fully functioning prototypes, and beyond that, they build actually the MVPs of the product. So you have that essentially blend of activities already happening on the startup level. The third one I already mentioned, build, validate, loop collapses. And I'll give you some practical tools today on how you can already start collapsing it for yourself. But yesterday we had offsite of our product team, and we actually asked ourselves right now if we can get from idea to fully validated product that we are ready to start building in 5 days, and the answer was yes, we can do that already. And I think what we'll see is we'll see more companies and more people embracing the same approach in the future. And by the way, if you do the analysis of companies like Replit, Lovable, 11 Labs, you will notice that they ship 1 feature a week on average, and their team is about 20 people. So to get to that level of efficiency, velocity, you really need to collapse everything you do with AI. Unified knowledge graphs. We have a fantastic product. I'll mention it, but it's not about Miro. Essentially, the idea is 3 years ago, if I was thinking about collecting feedback, 90% of the feedback I wanted to collect was quantitative, the rest interviews, because I would never want to read a survey with open-ended questions, especially one sent to 1,000 people. Now, everything flipped. We really want just open-ended feedback as much as possible, tie it with analytics, and create a full graph of everything that happens to our customers across every single touch points where we collect that information, from Gong calls to Salesforce to your analytics, and get a complete picture so you know what to build next. And we'll see that also blending with OKRs and other tools. So not only we know what our customers are telling us to build next, but also how it fits with our strategy. So what will be the role of humans in this world? I think the first thing is we have to let go of doing the mundane tasks. And really, what I see over here is 3 main, maybe sort of skills. Number 1 is reframing problems. AI can't do this. It can. I think it was Andrej Karpathy who said that working with AI is like working with an intern who has encyclopedic knowledge, but is also really dumb. And what cross-domain context you're asking it to connect. So if you're thinking that applications, let's say from psychology, will be very useful in your product development, AI probably will not come up with that idea. You have to bring it, and that's essentially what the roles of humans will be. Being creative, bringing those different influences, steering AI in the right direction. And finally, the human attention crisis, and how do you bridge the gap? I think if you ask yourself what happens if every company ships a feature once a week, I can tell you what happens. No one uses anything. Because we don't have time to learn, we don't have time to adapt. And to be very honest, we already see that where tools like all the amazing Adobe Creative tools are disappearing because they have too many features, and nobody really wants to read a book to learn how to use Photoshop, and they are being replaced by simpler and simpler tools. And this process will accelerate even further. But it will go in 2 directions. I think one is radical simplicity, and this is product managers becoming a bit like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the music producer Rick Rubin, who won 9 Grammy Awards, doesn't play an instrument, doesn't know sound engineering. Actually, I would never let him in the studio if he was producing my album, but what he's really good at is telling you what to remove. What to remove from your song, what to simplify, and essentially that will be one of the skills. What to remove, what to simplify, what not to include. The second one is hyper-personalization. There is no reason why my UI should look the same as your UI if there is AI behind it. It can be custom built to my situation, to my context, to my desires, to my preferences, to my past habits, and that will be the second thing we'll start seeing. So now, what is the approach to essentially succeeding in this world. I'll start with the simplest one. If you have never built your agent, I'll give a shout out to Zapier. I actually had a test with my boss that during leadership team meeting, while we are presenting, I can build an agent in 10 minutes that does competitive intelligence for me on Zapier. And I can, because it's roughly 8 clicks. It takes 10 minutes because you have to do the test, it has to run, retrieve the information, you have to look at the information, but it takes 10 minutes. Now, every Monday, I get updates on all the competitors for every single product that is in my portfolio. And normally, it would take a couple of hours at least to check. And by the way, it costs exactly 12 cents. So I spend 12 cents, and I have time to get a coffee and very quickly look at the summary of the most important facts. But when you're designing this, I think what you will see is you will see 2 perspectives. There are people who think AI can do anything right now and are overhyping it. And then people who went from that hype and say, no, AI actually is not that good at too many things. I don't use it at all. And the reality is somewhere in the middle. And I had this argument yesterday with a friend of mine, and I said, if someone gave me 8 interns that I can tell to work 24 hours a day, and they follow my instructions to the letter, I'll be very delighted. I know they can't do everything, but what they can do right now is fantastic. They can recognize images. They can analyze movies. They can summarize competition. They can criticize itself. They can correct themselves. So if you think about it and you really leverage it, you can build something that works, but you should not assume it will work out of the box. So treat them like overconfident junior interns. That's what they are. Make sure that you go with the simple objectives. Ask for 2-3 different approaches so you can decide what works. Start with high-friction, repetitive tasks. Keep the downside low, meaning don't ask them to send that summary to your CEO. Ask them to send it to you first so you can review it, and then when you're comfortable after 10 or 20 times, let it maybe from time to time send it to some other people. Give sufficient context. Otherwise, it will pick its own context. Iterate early and small, and build feedback loops so you can see when it's working and when it doesn't. And when you do that, it works like a charm. And yes, it's not going to be 2 minutes, I write a prompt. Probably the first agent you build, you might have 10, 15 iterations before it works well. But as you start measuring how much time you're saving every week that you have for other things in your life or just to be creative, it can be very, very addictive very fast. And I'm sure the organizers will share the slides, so you don't have to take the pictures, but I also put the try at home prompt. So if you want to try it, this is what I'm using for one of our products, Miro prototyping. And essentially, it really, I stopped looking at competition, I stopped using Google. I just rely on this as the only source. And by the way, we had a competitive intelligence person, and AI did a better job. So yeah, so that's one. Number 2, I always had this dream. When I went and talked to the friends who work at Apple, they told me, you know, when we are building products, we are doing 12, 14, 15 versions. And then we simulate different outcomes. And then we slowly choose the one that is the best. I was like, well, no one will ever give me so many designers so I can do that. And last week, I was testing our Miro prototyping. And by the way, you know, Replit, Lovable, plenty of tools out there that you can use for prototyping. But I was testing Miro prototyping, and I built 12 versions of an app I was thinking about in 2 hours. Complete end-to-end prototypes. I can now take to 10, 20 people, ask them for feedback, do usability tests, and so on. If you're getting into prototyping, if you're building, there are really two approaches to take. The first important question you have to ask yourself, will I be reusing this code? And I like to code, so my first thing was always jumping into tools like Replit, Lovable, really working on the code, making sure that it's reusable down the road. But what I realized is most of the engineers don't really want to use that AI-generated code as a starting point. And it was a waste of time. And it's kind of similar, I guess, to Figma Dev. where, if I'm reading correctly, about 14% of engineers reuse the code that Figma generates in their apps. The rest just look at it as a reference, but then essentially code from scratch. So depending on which way you're going, if you need to give code to the engineers, Replit, Lovable, or absolutely fantastic Bolt. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to spend time debugging. And to be honest, if I'm building a prototype and I'm trying to do 12 in 2 hours, I can't have any debugging in my product. So I used Miro prototyping because it's on the canvas. There's no code behind it. I can drag and drop things, but AI generates flows of 5, 6, 7 pages at the same time. And I can very quickly sort of visualize different ideas, test them, and move on. So what does it mean in practice for us? I think the first thing is we're going to move from fixed roles. And it will be very interesting how it happens, because we have very much ingrained sort of territoriality. And I see this in many companies right now, where people start using AI and there's friction. Why you're doing what I should be doing, why you're doing what I should be doing. So humans will be essentially dictating the speed at which this change happens. It's not going to be dependent on the tools, but it's going to be dependent on how quickly we can adapt as companies. But as you can imagine, if you have 4 people and everyone can do any role on the team, by definition, you're going to be more resilient, faster, generate better ideas, and ship much, much, much faster. And of course, if someone goes on holidays, not a problem. Anyone else can do their job. But for us, PMs in particular, develop your interface skills. Translate human creativity to AI inputs. Really test how you can describe things in a way that LLMs can understand and build. And also look at the value of your insight. I have to admit, I was overhyping a lot of the AI work until I started looking back essentially at where the ideas came from. And I realized that about half of the best ideas came directly from myself or other people who were prompting them. And finally, keep your prompts, iterate on them, version them, see what's working, see what's not. It will make your life much easier down the road. And you can try synthetic expert feedback. This is another use case I use quite often. I have my own collections of books, and this is for UX. I have about 14 on the list that I think are really exceptional and cover all the core UX risks. So I wrote the prompt that essentially allows me to upload a set of images to Claude, and it will tell me what I need to fix based on the UX theory. So here are 2 examples of the reports. They are spot on. They are actually so spot on that they covered some things our own UX team missed. And by the way, there was actually nothing here that we would not recommend, which was quite fantastic. I believe the one on the right is from ChatGPT, the one on the left is from Claude. What I always do is I use 2 or 3 engines because the results also complement each other, and I get much better insights on what we need to improve, what we need to fix. Okay, the collapsed, let's see if the video loads, but the collapse of the one idea to validation. So first of all, what I started doing right now is I rely on deep research for almost any task that requires me to build business model, that requires me to do competitive analysis, that essentially requires me to get secondary research data. And what I do is I usually use Perplexity as the first thing, because Perplexity is really good at testing its own sources, providing them, ensuring everything is credible and there are no hallucinations. But I also run ChatGPT deep research, and I started using Claude for deep research as well. Compare them together, put them into single output. I also do that to actually understand the problems with competition. So if I need to, for example, understand how is, let's say, Lucidchart comparing to Miro in technical diagramming, I can ask Perplexity to go not only through social networks and get any feedback from there, but also through sites like G2 to essentially give me all the reviews, summarize them, tell them what the problems are, tell them when they happen, how they happened. And then prototype with Miro prototyping, or with Replit, or Lovable, and finally, test with synthetic personas and UX experts. I also started using a tool called Ballpark HQ. If you have never heard of it, that's okay. It's a very tiny startup, but it's created by the same guys who built Marvel in the past. So if you use Marvel or Envision 10 years ago, more or less, it's the same team. They've built an amazing tool that will design your user research, that will find you human participants, that will actually run the surveys or the interviews with them and compile the results for you. That takes over a couple of days, but if you're really thinking about democratizing UX research, they are doing that. You really don't need much of a knowledge of how to do validation and user research, and you can get feedback from 10, 20 people or from a survey that validates any idea that you're building. And this is another example. This is my sort of very quick hack, Cloud Synthetic Validator. You can upload your product, or even, in some cases, use actually an agent to go through your website and try to do the steps for you. And then it can give you feedback from different types of personas. And as you can see, it's actually quite accurate. More or less what you're seeing on the right is feedback I asked on our side menu. And I would say it overlapped about 90% with our user research. So if you think about this takes you 3 minutes to do, and you have 90% of what you would get from 3 weeks of user research, it's a great thing to do before you do user research. By the way, I'm not suggesting this should replace user research, but the way we are thinking about it is UX research should be the thing you do on the top, at the end, to uncover things that AI missed. But until then, you can run 6, 7, 8 rounds of synthetic research and really polish the product without necessarily having very slow loops of working with human users. Unified knowledge graph. I think there's now about 6 or 7 companies that do that. Miro acquired a company called Cardinal a year ago. Reforge acquired a company called Monterey AI for their insights. What the product does is very simple. It takes all the knowledge you have about your customers, all the unstructured feedback, every gong call that CSMs had, salespeople had, every interaction with your surveys, with your in-app prompts, with your NPS meters, compiles it together, and based on that tells you what to build next. But it not only tells you what to build next, it tells you how much revenue you can potentially generate from that, because it actually ties it to the account sizes, looks at the probability that something like this would actually convert that account or retain that account or expand that account, and helps you figure out ROI very quickly. I think this product has been in beta now for about 5, 6 months. And my favorite quote of a PM using it was, whenever I have an argument with my boss, the founder, I just take Miro Insights, and that usually settles the argument in 10 seconds. Because we both can have opinions, we get actually an answer with the data here. And for me, this is fantastic. I think, as a PM, you probably know very well the arguments with your stakeholders, and there's always some, really highly paid person in the room who has a very strong opinion about what you should be building, that your data doesn't match. This is a tiebreaker that solves it. And actually, because it's centered also around telling you how much money you're going to make from it and who the potential companies are, who you could interview if you need beta testers and so on, it closes the loop on the entire sort of decisioning process, prioritization process. Not sure if this is worth going through, so I'm going to leave it over here. But if you ever are thinking about building this in-house, and I've built that product in-house prior to joining Miro, because there was no product like that. I've built it on top of Airtable. Here is kind of some tips to use for it. Say why I wouldn't build again is not because it was extremely hard to build in the first place, but because I ended up spending about 30, 40 hours a month maintaining it. And that essentially turned out to be really bad ROI. But otherwise, you can get off the ground and you can at least get some of those results with a homegrown solution on top of Airtable, on top of Monday.com, that you can probably build over a weekend. Okay, so some of the ways I work with AI. So I really sucked at writing prompts for a very long time until I realized I don't have to write prompts. LLMs can write prompts for me. So what I do now is essentially pair prompting. If anyone's a developer, you know pair programming. I do the same thing. I write, it improves, then it rewrites, then I ask comments. I test the prompt in the tool, I come back, I said, what were the mistakes, what I didn't get, it fixes it, and essentially within, I would say, half an hour, I can start with any new tool that requires prompting and get to the point where I'm pretty comfortable that I'm doing the right things and I'm getting the results that I want, simply by using ChatGPT and Claude as my prompting partners. In addition to that, what skills I recommend everyone to cultivate over the next 2-3 years? First of all, as I mentioned before, develop expertise in the areas AI is really bad at. And that actually applies to every function, including development. Because what AI right now is very bad at is recommending libraries and solutions that are new to market. Simply the models weren't trained on it. So anytime you can pick up novelty, you are really ahead and you're providing insights to AI that it cannot produce itself. The second thing, ethical reasoning. There were a few examples of AI advice I've got that would definitely get me fired. There were also a few examples of AI advice that I don't think I would like to see in the product. So you have to be that judge on what is right, what is wrong, what is empathetic, what is not. And then, as I mentioned before, cross-domain connections are another big piece where AI is really not connecting random ideas well together. And then the other thing is create processes that leverage your intuition. So figure out at what point of time in your workflow you actually add the most value. Outsource the things that are repetitive, they rely on patterns, and focus on the creative and on the oversight. Pair prompt as a way to learn to frame the problems and the ideas that AI can really leverage. Develop skills in reviewing and refining. And to some extent, this is a little bit about human testing, but it's also about using AI so building agents that can actually spot issues in agents' outputs and using them to recognize it. Bring your values and vision. AI is just a pattern matching machine, so you have to control it towards the good instead of controlling it towards the evil. And the last bit, so human attention. How many of you already struggle with the amount of new tools and new solutions you have to learn? I can tell you I suffer. Like I wake up on Saturday morning and I look at, okay, my competitors released 7 exciting new things that I should be checking out. And on top of that, my company just signed 3 new tools we should be using. And I'm getting an alert from Workday that I haven't finished the training on those tools yet. And it's only getting worse. So it's our job really to prevent that reality from happening. And I think one of the big problems that creates this reality is because we have synthetic personas and so on, we can ship much faster, so there's going to be more and more of that. So what we can do is, first of all, measure for the minimum cognitive load. So really, even with AI, make sure that your product is super easy to understand. I mean, Slack beat the previous version of Skype, Teams, and we've seen these revolutions of simpler product replacing more complex, especially in SaaS, but now it's default. You cannot ship difficult products. If it takes more than a minute to figure out what to do and get to value, most people are already bored and moving to something else. So set very high bar for that. Build AI copilots to handle complexity, but surface decision points to the users. We've done a lot of research with our customers, and our customers, especially product leaders, told us two things. Hey, I don't know what data I should be looking at, because we are generating so much data, I'm completely overwhelmed. So I'm responding to some random data that someone packaged for me, and I'm definitely missing important things. And then I get all of this data, and I don't know what is the right decision framework I should apply. And AI is very good at solving those two problems. You still need to make that decision. But if you need an advice on, well, maybe you could use this lens to look at this or that lens to look at this, AI will give you good advice. And when it comes to synthesizing and picking the right data for you, there is nothing better than AI right now. And then the third one, focus on reduction. As PMs, we are trained to think more is better. If we build something, we get all the glory. We celebrate every time we're shipping a feature. I've never seen a celebration where you're actually removing or killing a feature, but that will be a key thing. If the statistics are correct, already 75% of features that are built in our products are never or rarely used. What does it mean? That means I'm looking at the menu, and 3/4 of the things in the menu are not relevant to me, but I'm getting stressed because the more choices there are, the more difficult it is to make decisions. It actually grows exponentially with every single choice. So by reducing the number of features, you actually will make your products much more successful than by adding more and more and more. Create learning interfaces, systems that become smarter with every interactions that learn from what you do. We started with very simple things like completions in your emails, right? But we are now getting to the point where AI can start writing emails on our behalf based on all the Gmail history of emails we have written. And I think what we need to do is we need to start thinking about what are those learning systems we can introduce that can make our products much easier and faster to use. Talked about knowledge graphs. Template matchmakers. So if you build a few different templates, let's say for UI, make sure that you're recognizing what your user is working on. I think 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I remember Adobe introduced this kind of changes where I could change whether I'm a photographer or now working on UI or something else, and the interface will change. I think right now I start to expect that this happens automatically based on what I started to do, and the system can detect it. And with that, provide things just in time. Surface features only when relevant, provide adaptive toolbars, and trigger nudges precisely when users approach value milestone. Final thing, I wanted to leave you with this as a bit of an inspiration. There is a startup called Pine AI, and essentially what they do is they build custom onboarding avatars and demos. So if you have a complex SaaS product, you go in, there's usually a face talking. Surprisingly, 95% of the time is the founder who wants to be the one whose face is there. And essentially, they walk you through the product, and you go, you click, and you arrive. I've been advising them for a while, and they had a big problem. About 70% or so of their trials were failing because the people who were building these walkthroughs actually had no idea how to do them. So we would find a demo that lasts 15 minutes and requires you to click 74 times, and then surprise, surprise, everyone drops out after 1 minute. Right? And these are some basics of the UX, but it's really hard to build a PLG product or even a high-touch product if the user doesn't really want to follow your best practices. So we ask ourselves a simple experiment. Can we build a couple of different agents and literally look at your marketing materials, your website, your knowledge base, and based on that, build 1 to 1 minute 30 walkthrough showing the most valuable features, showing the aha moment, and write the script. Surprise. It actually works better than most humans. Not only that, the #1 reason why it fails is because marketing materials are often outdated. So essentially what we have is a situation where this is built, and then someone in the company looks at this and says, this is fantastic, 6 months ago. But we've shipped these 2 new things, and this one doesn't work. Oh, are you aware that you're still marketing them on your website and in your knowledge base? Oh, no, not really. But so there is still human interaction, right? And partially because we are so bad at keeping up to date with our own product evolution. But this builds fantastic walkthroughs in a minute and a half. Normally, I would send probably a PM working on this on 4 or 5 Reforge courses, give them 5 different books, and so on. This time, I just gave all that data, all that insight that we have accumulated to AI, and it builds the skeleton, and it just asks humans the most important decision. Is this really the most important feature to show? Is this really the aha moment? And you can curate this very quickly, and you can launch this in a matter of hours in the best case scenario, days in the worst case scenario, and prior to this typical journey would take 3 months to build. So, yeah, what I would leave you with. If you haven't built an agent, give it a try. It's really easy. It's a bit addictive, because once you start saving time and experiencing the fact that you can actually do much more with your free time, you might build more than one. But give the first one just to get a sense of how they are working. If you're building products and you want feedback fast, create synthetic personas. You'll still test it with humans, but you can do multiple rounds of tests without ever having to worry about how do I find my first beta tester. And create your first prototype if you haven't. They're easy to use, a lot of fun, and you can even build tools for yourself now, because over the weekend you can actually build a complete app that will work. You will see that you will save a lot of time, and what I do is I track actually hours that I reclaim, because it keeps me motivated to do more and learn more. And look at 2 things. What is your framework for evaluating quality? And obviously that will be very specific on the application. And decision velocity. So whether you can actually move from an idea to shipping a product faster, because a lot of the stops, a lot of the sort of discussions are being replaced by something that is data-driven and can be done instantaneously. And that's all from me. Thank you so much.